I'm going to present some performance tweaks. So these are stuff that I found over the years, how to make Android Studio behave a little bit better on my computer. Right now I'm on a Chromebook, but I was on a MacBook Pro before, so it's not specifically for Linux or Chrome OS. Those are tricks that I found, yeah, that work for most of the machines. And same thing for Gradle, how to make it a little bit faster when you build. I work at Transit. We have a big C++ library that had a lot of time when we built. So we had to figure out some way to make it better. So I've been doing Android development for the past 10 years. I've been having problem with Android Studio for the past 7 years because I was on Eclipse before. So yeah, I started on Eclipse. I didn't jump ship right away. I waited a couple of versions just because it was really, really, really painful at the beginning. And Android Studio is still painful. I just updated yesterday to 3.6, and I've been trying to reconfigure my computer for the better part of today. So it's an ongoing struggle. So I'm gonna specifically talk about 5 tips for Android and 7 for Gradle, and then we have an extra one just for kicks. So let's start with the Android one. So I'm gonna go back and forth just to show you where you can do all of those settings in Android Studio. If something is not clear, don't hesitate, just raise your hand and I can answer a question. So the first tricks, it's not from me, it's from someone you might know, Jake Wharton, on a random Reddit comment. He just said, you should disable every single plugin that you don't use. And to be honest, it makes a lot of difference because there's a lot of plugins and opening Android Studio is kind of slow. So to do it, you just go Files, Settings, super easy. You go on Plugins, and you disable pretty much everything. So you can see, I guess you use source control, so you should keep at least one of them, either Git or SVN if you're one of those. If you want to build at some point, Gradle is a really good idea to keep enabled. Kotlin, stuff like that. The rest is just disabled. One that is important is GUnit. We should all be doing unit testing. Right? If you're not there yet, you can disable it, but you should still do it. So just disable everything. Android Studio is going to ask you to restart just to drop everything, and you should see right away that the open time should be a lot faster, and even when navigating through different files, it's going to be a lot faster because some of those are language support. So if you open, like in that case, at the bottom YAML, it's going to try to do syntax highlighting. But if you're not coding in YAML, there's no point into loading all that language and sugar syntaxing stuff if you don't use it. And even if you use one once, it's going to render as a text file. It's still usable if it's only once in a while. So that was for trick 1. Second one, you should edit the custom VM options. So those are the GVM options for Android Studio. So basically, you go Help and edit custom VM option. It's going to open a text file. Usually that text file is blank. I don't know if it's big enough. This should make it better a little bit. So usually that file is empty except for the comment line at the top. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. I'm not going to go through all of them. The first two basically is to, actually the second one is to give at least 3 gig of memory to Android Studio. The first one is a special one just for me because I don't want my computer to use memory. The first one is the minimum memory that you need when you open Android Studio. The second one is the maximum that it's going to use. Basically, I just want to be sure that the OS doesn't think that some of that 3 gig is available for something else and give it to someone else, start swapping and blah blah. So I just set 3 gig is the minimum and the maximum, and it works quite well for me. The new ratio, I have no idea what it does. So I didn't invent any of the tricks that I'm gonna present. I just found on the internet most of them. Some of those you might have to tweak a little depending on how many RAM you have on your computer. Mine is 16 gigs, so I have plenty. That's really not a problem, but if you have like 8 gigs, you might want to lower those numbers a little bit. One interesting one is use system font. It's an anti-alias font setting. Basically, it's going to use the font rendering engine of the OS instead of the one from Java, and it's a lot faster. There's a way to enable OpenGL. For me, unfortunately, it doesn't work. On my Mac, it used to work really, really well. When I share the presentation, I'm going to paste more slides at the end just with the snippet of code, and I can put all of those in Slack also. ---- server is basically tell the GVN to boot in server mode. It's going to be a little bit slower when it boots, but for memory management and some optimization, it's actually faster, especially if you leave Android Studio open for a long period of time. And a long period of time is considered 3 to 4 hours, so I guess most of you is long. So everything else, just random stuff that I found on the internet. Second one, no dynamic version. So in your Gradle dependencies, if I do this, yes, you add dependencies, and at some point you decided I don't want to look at those, and I'm going to put a plus so it updates automatically. So there's a nice error message that we're not going to the error message, when you highlight it, is going to tell you that it can create unreproducible builds. So that's one thing why you should not add pluses here. The other thing is every 24 hours when you try to build your project, Gradle is going to try to update all the version and make sure that it works. And most of the time it's just going to do network requests for some reason. And if you have multiple pluses, then it has to check if they all match. So it's better to do as they say and just use the regular version and then update them. So if you use something different, let's say just a lower version, they're still going to tell you when there's an update. So it's super easy. You just Control Enter, update, and that's it. It's going to put the latest. So this should help also. There's a couple of experimental flags. So if you are on Android Studio 3.5 and more, you can go in the settings, and there's some nice things. I'm going to exit presentation mode. So if you go File, Settings, and then you go in the experimental at the bottom, there's a couple of things that are super interesting, especially if you have multiple variants. So basically, if you split your APK based on language, screen density, and stuff like that, the only sync the active variant, basically, this one is available on 3.5, is going to only configure the Gradle task for the device that is plugged in. So if you're running a simulator, it's going to just use this one. If you're plugging a device, it's going to configure only for that device. So it doesn't look at all the resources that you're not going to use anyway, stuff like that. The do not build Gradle task is new. I don't know if it works. I didn't use it yet. But they keep adding more flags into that screen. So basically, you can go there and test and see if it works or not. The other one that I find really, really nice is the memory indicator. It's not going to make Android Studio faster, but it's going to tell you when it's super slow, maybe a reason why. So basically, I don't know if you can see at the bottom. No, it's exactly on the other side. do this. You can see, maybe not at the bottom here, that here. If you can see here, 910 out of, this is the number of RAM that I gave Android Studio. Basically, this is called a memory indicator. It's going to tell you how much memory is used, but when you tap on it, it's going to actually force a garbage collection on the JVM from Android Studio. So now I just started Android Studio on a super small project, so it's slow, but if you use it throughout the day, at some point it's going to reach pretty much a maximum, and then it starts doing garbage collection over and over again, just to liberate a little bit of RAM, just for your project when you switch file and stuff like that. So at some point, Android Studio start getting super slow when you switch file. You can go there, click on this, it's going to do a garbage collection and liberate a lot of memory. It doesn't take a lot of time, but just you do it. And to show that, you go in settings, appearance, and at the bottom there's a show memory indicator. So when you check that, it's going to add that small thing at the bottom that you can click on it. So let me just close this. That's pretty much it for the Android Studio part. Android Studio is only part of the problem. As you all know, you have to use Gradle to build your project, and Gradle can be quite slow. There's a lot of things that goes around. Every time you press play, you see like 10,000 lines go through in your console. So there's a couple of things that we can do to make it a little bit faster. So one of the things you can do is disable the PNG cruncher in debug. Basically, if you have a PNG in your application, as soon as you hit play, the default is that it's going to try to optimize all the PNGs. So first thing, that cruncher is not the best one, so you should not use it anyway. You should optimize with, I think it's Optimize PNG. It's an open source application that's going to do a better job. And you can disable this one if you don't use it. So you can always disable it in debug because we don't really care if the PNGs are optimized. The app is going to be slow not because of the quality of PNGs, because it's in debug. If you optimize it manually using another tool, then you can disable on both build, debug, and release. Better yet, you can convert all your images to WebP, so then you don't use actually PNG. I put a small asterisk there because there's two images that I know of that you cannot convert to WebP. It's the notification icon. If you do it, it's not going to work. Basically, you're just not going to see anything in your when you receive a notification. It's going to be a blank icon. And I forgot about the other one. The launcher is okay, actually. It's going to come back, sorry. So Android Studio provides a super nice way to convert all the PNGs to WebP. So if you go in your resources, I'm going to take my launcher. You can select, oops, not this one. If you select all of them, right click, and then say convert to WebP. It's going to ask you about the compression level. Usually you can try loosely with the quality and can even lower it a bit. But if you do so, look with the designer, because sometimes it's going to be a little bit different, and they have usually a keen eye for these kind of things, and they're going to say, oh, the app looks shitty on Android. So, yes, if you do it, just pay attention. Oh yes, the other type of image that you cannot convert is 9-patch. There was a bug in Android Studio 3.4 where when you convert, there's a way to convert every single image in your project without selecting them. You just say convert everything. But it would do 9-patch, but then it breaks the 9-patch and it just doesn't render as 9-patch. And you see a nice image with black border. It's fixed in 3.5, I think, but I didn't redo convert all to check. So if you have 9-patch, just make sure that you don't convert them, because it's not going to work. So I don't know if any of you uses Crashlytics. It's really, really useful. But one thing that they do is they generate a new build ID every time you press play. Basically, every time you build using Gradle. So there's a way to disable that, because every time you generate a build ID, it's going to change your Gradle file, and then you have to resync, and it's going to just take more time. So you can disable basically in your Gradle dependencies. Sorry, not in the dependency. I'm gonna show the file. When you go in build type, debug, and then here where I have crunch PNGs, it's a bit small, but you can add a new line just to say disable the update build ID. So it's not going to generate a new build ID in debug. Most of the time it's not going to change anything. It's just going to make it faster. One thing that you can do even better, you can disable Crashlytics completely on debug, so it's not going to add any code to your application, and it's going to make your build faster. One thing, I didn't put the aesthetics, but I should have. If you just put enable Crashlytics false in your Gradle build and it's play, it's going to crash on start, just because by default the Crashlytics library is going to try to bootstrap, and because you said disable, it's not going to work. So if you read the documentation, it's going to tell you exactly. There's like 3 lines of code that you need to put, and it works super well after that. So other thing that you can do, these are for your Gradle.properties. It's a file in your project. You should enable the daemon. Basically, every time you hit play, it's going to start a new Gradle process and build with that and then kill the process. If you enable the daemon, it's just going to start that process once and then just reuse the same process over and over again, as long as you press play. Another one is parallel build. This one will be helpful if you have multiple modules in your application. So if you try to split in different modules, basically it's going to try and build every module that doesn't have dependencies between themselves in parallel. So if you have multiple processors, most computers do now, it should be helpful. The other one is Gradle caching. Basically, Gradle now have a build cache. So basically, if you build anything in Java, and it works with Kotlin also, it's going to put in a special folder basically the result of that build. And if you don't change a part of the code, it's going to reuse that same code, so you don't have to rebuild it. I did put an asterisk there because we use Dagger and the Kotlin synthetics, and those sometimes it doesn't figure out that they changed, and it creates really, really random errors saying this field doesn't exist in your XML, but it does. And you don't know what happened. If you change a file, you can try a clean, it's not gonna change anything because the Gradle cache is not inside your project folder, it's inside your user folder. So when that happens, you need to go in the .gradle folder inside your user folder. There should be a build cache folder. Just flush everything, and your next build is going to be a little bit slower, but at least it's going to build. So you can tweak memory params. So we can take a look at this one, the Gradle.property. Yep. So these also, I put a couple of things here. So the daemon, the parallel caching that I talked about. The other one is a GVM arc. Basically, when Gradle boots, it also uses a GVM, and you can specify the memory parameters. In that case, I did put 2.5 gig. So one thing that is interesting to note is that if you want to have what they call in-process dex, so the dexing part of building the APK, you need to add at least 2 gig. So basically, by default, the default GVM arcs for Gradle is 1 gig, but every time it's going to reach the dex process, it's going to actually start a new process, do the dexing, and then get the result. If you put at least 2 gig, the same the same GVM is going to do the dexing also. So basically, you skip that creating a new process. The rest is just file encoding and stuff like that. So if you put at least 2 gig, it's going to make your build actually a lot faster. So the other one that really doesn't always work is offline mode. Basically, it's just going to skip checking all the dependencies on the internet. If you don't update your dependencies, it works well, but most of the time I forget that I enabled it, and then I change the version number, and then try to build, and it say, I don't find the new whatever library you added. So, yeah. It's better not to put the pluses at the beginning, so you don't have to enable the offline mode. So that's pretty much it for the Android Studio and the Gradle build. But what if we want to make things even faster? So there's a couple of things we could do. Basically, buy a $50,000 MacBook Pro. Because as I showed before, the more, if you can enable parallel, if you can put more memory, it's going to make it faster. So if you buy a $50,000 computer, it's going to be super fast. But I don't have that kind of money. So you can try to steal CPUs and memory from your friends or colleagues. Usually that doesn't work really, really well. Or you can run a super big server. Basically, the cloud is super powerful. You can rent machine by the minutes or by the hour. And it costs a lot less than having that same beefy machine sitting next to you. So what if we had that big server? How would we go about using it to build our application? So basically, I thought about it a while ago while walking with Boris, actually, coming back from work, and we said, what if we could copy all the local file to the server? So basically, scopy everything on a big machine, and then I would run the Gradle build command on there, and then scopy everything from the result back to your local computer. Basically, that would work. So I started creating a small bash script that does it. So rented a big server, 64 cores, 128 gigs of RAM, and it was basically paid by the minute. So I would boot it in the morning, run my little script, it works, and then at 5 o'clock when I leave the office, I just shut down the server because I don't want to pay. It was just a test, so it was a personal server. So it works, but it's really, really painful because you have to do everything manually. Basically, you cannot use the play button on Android Studio. You cannot use anything that is super nice. So you have to always run the command line, install your APK manually, blah, blah. Super annoying. And when I try to tell Boris, like, oh, you should use my script, my build is super fast, like 3 times fast, he said, not really. Like, I prefer pressing play even if it's slower. So I was kind of bummed that nobody wanted to use my solution because it was really, really faster, but yeah. So I looked on the internet and I found a Gradle plugin that is called Miracle. It's based on another plugin that is called Mainframer. Basically, it's a Gradle plugin that does all that I said before. So scopy all the file on the server, run the same Gradle command that you would, scopy whatever you need back. So in our case, what we do is scopy all the source file, run the Gradle build, and just download the APK. And Android Studio, after that, is able to basically install that APK, and because it's a plugin, on Gradle, Android Studio doesn't even know that it's not doing the job. So you can see all the logs, you can see everything. It's just super fast. So our C++ library has 800 files to build, and basically every time you switch branch, the NDK is not super brilliant, and it doesn't figure out that most of the file didn't change, because when you check out some other branch, it's going to modify a bunch of files for no reason, just the date is not the same. So it's going to recompile everything. Using the server makes our life a lot easier because we have 64 cores to build C++ file at once instead of 4 on my computer or anybody else. one other thing that is super nice now is that we are actually 6% of the team. 5 of them uses the same server, and we can share basically a C++ cache. So every time I check out a specific branch and build it once, if Laurence after that check out the same branch, it's going to be already built, and she's going to basically get this same benefit. So just for one person, you get about 3% faster on the incremental build, and 5% for 5 times on a full build. Basically, at Transit, we do split the APKs on the processor type. So we have 8 different builds, so that takes a lot of time. Basically, on the server, it's not as painful as it was before. We even actually added our Jenkins server, now built on that same machine. So every time you push on develop, the server is going to basically do a build. So next time someone check out develop or whatever, it's going to already have that ready and already built. Basically, if you open a PR, we build that PR merged with develop. It's going to get built on the server. So next time when the PR is merged, everybody already has everything built. So when you hit play, it's super fast. The only thing that doesn't work yet is the Gradle build cache that I talked about earlier. Basically, right now only the C++ cache is shared with everybody that uses the server. The Java Gradle cache is not used yet. So we have a specific one per person. So it's still, we still get the benefit, but it's not shared with everybody. And yes, with the 6-person team, hitting build and saving not a couple of minutes, but at least 1 minute every time. It adds up, especially that I don't code super well, so I have to hit play multiple times to get something right. So if I save 1 minute every time, then it's really interesting. That's pretty much it. So as I said earlier, I'm going to share the content of my files. You most likely are going to need to adjust them. And if you have anything else in yours that are not presented in my example, please share with everybody. Basically, even though I'm somewhat satisfied with how it's doing Gradle right now, I'm pretty sure there's a way to make it even better. So if anybody else knows how to, let me know. Do you have any questions? Yes. Most of the time, yes. Just don't update on the Studio 3.6. But yes, it's my main machine. Actually, I don't bring my Mac anymore, so I'm only using this one. Yes.
The issue regarding the Gradle cache, the Gradle cache, right?
Yep.
I have a problem with Dagger where it doesn't return its file properly after the more often the like. And your solution for deleting the specific path in Gradle cache, that never worked for me.
Okay.
It works for everyone on my team, but except me for some reason. And my only way is to like disable the Gradle cache and then rebuild. That's the only way to correct it, unless I want to like modify the file myself, right?
Yeah. So one of the things I would look in your project, you can change the Gradle directories. So maybe your directory is not the default one. I would check that, especially if disabling it make it work.
Yeah, disable cache.
So I would check maybe you have a special setting that says don't use the default build cache folder.
Okay.
Just a guess. Sorry. Any other question? Yes.
Have you tried the new tool in Windows before that analyzes your Gradle build and tells you exactly how much time spent in each task? It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I didn't use it yet. Basically, I saw that yesterday while finalizing the talk. I tried to use it, but I was on the old version, and it just, yeah. Yep. Yes.
What's your
You mean completely clean build time?
Completely clean for me for 7 minutes.
Okay, completely clean with the server is about 2 minutes 30. Completely clean with my computer, and we're talking only one implementation, so one processor. Completely clean on my computer is about 13 minutes. Yeah, so the server makes a lot of difference. You need to have a good internet connection. Because you're copying like a shit ton of file, and you need to configure it a little bit. If people are interested, you can ask me either afterward or on Slack. I can show you the configuration that we use to make it work. Basically, you don't want to copy back the whole build folder because there's a bunch of intermediate files that you don't really need. But some of them are interesting, basically the build config and stuff like that. Yes.
Does it copy all the files or just the diff of the files?
So it uses rsync, so it's just the diff that are updated. But basically, when you copy back, all the build folder is always different. So in that case, you want to specifically choose which file to copy back. Anything else? I'm gonna. Yep. No.
For the personal server, we use it for like 8 hours.
Yep.
Do you have an estimate of how much that would cost?
So I did that for 2 weeks, and it did cost me $25.
Per day?
No, total.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. So yeah. So I use GCP. The only thing is, most of the night I would forget to shut down the server. So it might be a little bit lower. Yeah. That's it. Thank you.